What's a hero without a helping hand? Or a helping wing? A helping tail? A helping hoof? Yeah, you get the idea. Today we're ranking every Disney hero sidekick from good to most heroic. We'll begin with the characters who, although they're aligned with the good guys, have enough issues to make them a little bit morally questionable. We'll call them the flawed friends. For the least good Disney sidekick, we have to go with Runt from Chicken Little. This very ironically named pig is one of Chicken Little's best friends, and to his credit, he's usually a pleasant guy. Despite being cowardly, he does what he needs to in order to help and support Chicken Little, including being one of the literal 3 people in town who doesn't treat him like a complete outcast after a simple mistake. All that's well and good, and it'd be great if we could stop there. But then there's the end of the movie, when Foxy Loxy has her brain scrambled by the aliens. Their leader assures the people of Okie Oaks that they can put her back to normal, to which Runt urges them not to, saying she's now perfect.
Lollipop! Lollipop!
I get that Foxy was a bully and all, but a kid being mean is hardly justification for them being lobotomized and never able to return to who they once were. Soaring into the next spot, we have Archimedes from Sword in the Stone. Far from the only wisecracking bird on Disney's film record, Archimedes is a pompous grouch who's more interested in pointing out his owner's flaws than actually helping him on his journey.
Certainly a great deal better than you do.
He's loyal, sure, and he does actually come in handy sometimes, like when he helped to rescue Arthur from being eaten when he was turned into a fish. But he's low on our list not for any malice he possesses, but more so for a lack of any superheroic attributes. From one bird to another, next up we have Wilbur from The Rescuers Down Under. To his credit, he's not a helping hand on lobotomies or anything, not on screen at least, and he actually has a lot of good attributes. Despite initially refusing to give the main duo a ride in the snowstorm, which is understandable honestly, he changed his tune immediately upon hearing that there was a kidnapped child at stake.
Nobody's gonna take a kid's freedom away while I'm around, nobody!
That shows that Wilbur has some good values and will do his part to protect the innocent, but this is unfortunately paired with a serious attitude problem. Wilbur constantly places himself on a high horse, like when he refused to heed Jake's warning that he was coming in too fast to land safely. He can also be pretty hesitant to help out, like when he had to be badgered into keeping Marahut's eggs warm until the rescuers could return. He's a good guy, but he has some ego problems in need of adjustment, which I'm sure him being forced into a parenting role against his will is gonna help him with. Man, poor dude. Next up, we've got a classic double redemption arc on our hands. Tong and Noi from Raya and the Last Dragon are up next. These two were in very different living situations before meeting Raya. Tong and Noi respectively spent most of their lives as ruthless warlord and notorious burglar disguised as innocent baby, respectively. Once they became Raya's new teammates, though, they cleaned up their acts and ultimately became much better people, even forming an admittedly adorable father-daughter bond with each other. Almost makes us forget that Tong has proudly crushed mountains worth of skulls in his lifetime. Almost. This is one of the more unconventional picks on our list, but we feel like Fagin from Oliver and Company deserves a mention. Based on the character from Oliver Twist, Fagin is a much more pleasant take on the character. Rather than being a child-exploiting scumbag, Fagin here is a down-on-his-luck homeless man who uses his beloved pet dogs as assistants and repaying his debts to Bill Sykes, who, in his defense, is a genuinely terrifying guy. Fagin's worst deeds really come down to just how far he's willing to go to get out of his debt, most notably holding Oliver for ransom against his new wealthy owners, but when he discovers that said owner is a little girl, he immediately relents and even helps to rescue her when she's kidnapped by Bill Sykes. He's a genuinely good man, just one who's stuck in a pretty rough situation right now. Right after him, from the same movie, we have Dodger. He doesn't have the most flattering introduction of the day, since he starts out by tricking Oliver into helping him steal a bunch of food from a hot dog stand, only to take it all for himself, and proceeds to sing a song about how much better and smarter he is. Still, like Fagin, he's not a bad guy by any means, just a dog who's in a rough position due to poverty, and does his best to provide for himself and his family through whatever means necessary. He also does ultimately accept Oliver as a member of the pack, and once they part ways, as a genuine friend. I can't help but wonder if things might have gone a bit more smoothly for this ragtag group if they recruited Abu from Aladdin. It might seem harsh to place this little guy so low, but Abu has more than his fair share of selfish traits. I mean, granted, he is a monkey who's been presumably raised as Aladdin's thieving companion. To his little mind, when he helps Aladdin trick people or steal food, he's just doing what he needs to in order to survive. Still, even when his life isn't on the line, Abu lets his kleptomania take over a lot, to the point where he touches a gem and nearly gets himself and Aladdin killed in the Cave of Wonders. We're giving Abu the Greed Sinner medal for his habitual theft, but we're not gonna act like that makes him pure evil. He sometimes uses his craftiness for good, like helping Aladdin save Jasmine from an angry street merchant. Even if he's greedy and unlikely to stick his neck out unless he absolutely has to, you can count on Abu when times are tough, even if he's a little scamp most of the time. As long as we're talking about the more mischievous characters, we have to give Mushu the next spot. Mushu is relatively low on the list on account of him being being a bit of a schemer. He tricks the other Guardians into thinking he's the stone dragon tasked with going after Mulan and bringing her back, only to end up helping her in order to prove himself to his former bosses. His whole adventure with Mulan starts out with a lie, and he's technically using her as a means of getting his old job back. Over the course of the movie, though, we see Mushu grow into a better person, dragon, and genuine friend to Mulan. He had to be held back by Cri-Kee when Shang got up in her face, and always stuck by her no matter what, even when things got rough. In the end, Mushu finally got his status as a Guardian back after proving himself to be a pretty darn good one, and while it doesn't erase his selfish side, it shows that he's a good guy who's earned his role as a valiant Guardian spirit. Up next, we have Hercules' lifelong loyal steed, Pegasus. This winged steed is fiercely protective of Hercules and can quickly become vengeful with his opponents, or even his potential opponents. He's particularly hostile with Meg, with whom his issues appear to stem not from the fact that Meg poses a threat to Hercules, being an accomplice of Hades, but just because he's jealous of the love-struck attention Hercules is giving her. He shoots her some really angry glares throughout the story, takes advantage of her fear of heights by flying at purposely high speed so as to frighten her, and seemed to enjoy any time she got hurt. As a god's best friend, Pegasus has a good heart too, just one that's full of jealousy towards whomever's getting more of his bestie's attention. Now, let's move on to the characters who are more cut and dry good guys. These are the small-scale sidekicks, the ones who helped their heroes out, but having some of the less remarkable feats or motives to go with their altruism. Nico and Flit are basically the definition of sidekicks who fit in this category. They're among the animal buddies who don't have magical speaking capabilities, but make up for it with their loyalty and companionship with Pocahontas. Unfortunately, it's that very loyalty that causes them to butt heads over whether Pocahontas should be with John or Kokum, and that, paired with their lack of any particularly impressive heroic feats, is why we won't place them any higher. Disney's most well-intentioned source of misinformation, Scuttle from The Little Mermaid, is next. Think of him like Ariel's equivalent to Owl from Winnie the Pooh. This guy loves to hear himself talk, even if it's about human culture and gadgets he knows basically nothing about.
Human stuff, huh? Hey, let me see.
Does this technically make him a pathological liar? Well, maybe, but it always seems like Scuttle is convinced he does know about this stuff. He can even be quite clever at times, shown by him being the one who realized Vanessa was actually Ursula in disguise. He's not the best guy to go to for practical advice, but if you need a friend who will give you all he's got, Scuttle fits the bill. Tuk Tuk from Raya and the Last Dragon is the next noble steed on our list. Not much needs to be said about this little guy turned big guy. Tuk Tuk doesn't have any deep personal convictions nor a complex character arc or anything. He's just a pet who's kept fed by Raya and resultantly does his best to help protect and transport her however he can. From one steed to another, next up is Maximus from Tangled. One of the most stubborn sidekicks on our list, Maximus isn't the type who will let you in right away. This is understandable since, as you may have noticed, he is a horse, but while he's not the most open, Maximus is pretty sharp, and he shows no issue with helping his former nemesis Flynn to reunite Rapunzel with her family. You know, her real family. He also pushes Flynn to rescue Rapunzel in the final act, showing that his morals can outdo even those of Ryder at times. His Ryder, Flynn Ryder. Similarly, albeit slightly more friendly, is Sven, Kristoff's reindeer best friend, is more like an oversized puppy than the usual reindeer fare. He even doubles as a wingman, sensing that his owner has feelings for Anna and even helping save her life when the storm gets particularly rough. He's one of those characters who's really just kept from a higher spot by the fact that the other sidekicks are more heroic, or in the case of Thumper, they're even more innocent. Come on, you can't get much more pure than an adorable baby bunny, right? He's less of a sidekick and more of a friend, and you won't really catch him helping to save the world or anything. Nonetheless, if you need a friend to talk to or help you learn how to ice skate, Thumper's your guy. Hey Hey from Moana is relatively low on our list. How do I put this? Well, he's stupid, like really stupid, and also really lucky since in both movies he's constantly cheating death without even trying. A complete lack of brain cells means his boat snack gets the Darwin Center Medal, but that hasn't stopped us from absolutely loving him, even if he doesn't really do much, or anything really, to help Moana on her adventure. He's also harmless any way you slice it. Just keep Hey Hey away from Maui when he's hungry, please.
Boat snack!
From one master of land and sea to another, next up is Fish Out of Water from Chicken Little. Fish is a double-edged sword as a sidekick. On one hand, he's a loyal and supportive friend to Chicken Little and the gang, being one of a few characters in town to not relentlessly bully him over the acorn incident. On the other, though, he's also very easily distracted, often more focused on screwing around than whatever the gang is currently up to, which might even result in him getting abducted by aliens every so often. He's a good friend, and he does indirectly help expose the alien threat that Chicken Little was right about all along, but there are other good guys that did more overtly impressive deeds. Little John is one of the more chaotic good cast members on today's list, but don't let that fool you. This guy simultaneously acts as Robin Hood's right-hand man and his voice of reason. He takes the danger of their adventures more seriously than Robin and is a bit more risk-averse compared to his buddy. While that's totally understandable, it's worth mentioning that while Robin is more risky than Little John, that also means that he's more readily able to help the poor. Still, Little John is a good guy who cares about his community and always supports his best friend. That said, do not cross him unless you want him to lead a spontaneous diss track against you. Prince John truly was not like us. Up next, a quick mention of the mice from Cinderella is in order. Jack and Guss-Guss might seem like your typical Jerry Mouse knockoffs at first, and this is kinda true since they're constantly fighting for their lives against Lady Tremaine's fittingly named pet cat Lucifer. Given what they deal with daily, these two are pretty darn courageous, especially Jack, who willingly fought off Lucifer to try and save Guss-Guss. When Cinderella rescued him, Guss-Guss proved his own worth by helping to make her dress for the ball, showcasing a pretty decent sense of honor on both rodents' parts. Rapunzel's friend/dress-up doll, Pascal, is next. He was a friend to Rapunzel when she didn't have anyone else she could confide in. He encouraged her to leave the tower before Flynn showed up and tried his best to keep Rapunzel from being imprisoned again, even though all it got him was kicked into a wall. When Pascal was given the opportunity to be sure that Gothel would no longer be a threat, he took it, leading him to tripping up the witch and having her fall to her death. Man, wait, it just hit me that Pascal straight up killed the villain of the movie. Good for him! With the category called small-scale sidekicks, where else could we put Cri-Kee? Sure, it's up for debate whether or not Cri-Kee is actually a good luck charm, but lucky or not, he has another L word on his side: loyalty. This bug will stick by your side no matter what, and he gets extra points for that considering the fact that he's a cricket, so basically any danger could become deadly for him quite easily. His worst trait is his tendency to bicker with Mushu, but come on, it's Mushu. He's not exactly the most cooperative dude in the discussion today, though calling him a loser was maybe a bit too far, Cri-Kee. It doesn't bug us to follow up one insect with another. Next up is Evan Rude from The Rescuers. Now, this is a guy who's dedicated to his job. Despite being exhausted for the vast majority of the movie, nothing ever stops Evan Rude from being as helpful as possible to the people who need him, leading the charge to rescue Penny and rallying the other swamp creatures to do the same. It's already impressive to be willing to help save a kid, but to do so when you're an insect and a piece of paper could crush you, that's courage right there. She had a bit of a rough ride in terms of morals, but Tinkerbell came out of her adventure with more good traits than bad. Sure, she's incredibly jealous of whomever gets more of Peter's attention than she does, even going as far as to try and get Wendy killed for the crime of existing, I guess. That's worthy of the Envy Sinner medal to be sure, but she redeems herself by the end of the movie. After being tricked into giving away the Lost Boys' hiding place to Captain Hook, Tinkerbell overhears his plan and escapes captivity to rescue them, even willing to risk being blown up to save Peter and the gang. It's quite the redemption, one that gives even Gurgi a run for his money. At first, he definitely seems like a guy worthy of a spot on the lower half of the list. If you happen to have munchings and crunchings on you, he'll try and con you out of them, a crime for which we'll award him the Gluttony Sinner medal. We'd also point out that Gurgi's kind of portrayed as a coward for not wanting to help rescue Hen Wen from the Horned King's castle.
Oh, no, it's a terrible place.
But, like, look at this place, man. Why would he want to risk facing that for a kid he barely knows? Despite his initial selfishness, Gurgi proves himself to be a true hero in the end. Like Tink, he was willing to die if it meant protecting his friends, but unlike her, he actually does die temporarily, only revived by the witches of Morva. Greater love has no one than this, that he might die for his friends. This dude's even a hero by biblical standards, so we had to give him a pretty high spot on our list. Next up, we have Vanellope von Schweetz, the original princess of Sugar Rush. That was until King Candy did his thing and kept her royalty under wraps. Vanellope isn't introduced as the most pleasant character around. For a girl who wears candy all over her outfit, she's not exactly sweet at first.
I don't know, why are you so freakishly annoying?
But you've got to remember that she was bullied by her whole community for the entirety of her life that she could remember. When she finally becomes friends with Ralph, she slowly but surely becomes a happier, kinder person, coming out of her shell and becoming the sweetheart that hardened exterior was hiding all along. Don't be afraid. Despite being a ghost, Zero is nothing to fear. He's not exactly a fighter, but Zero makes up for it by being a top-tier friend to Jack. Whenever Jack is sad, alone, in despair, you get the idea. Zero is always there for his buddy, and with the help of his magical, totally not copyright infringing, glowing nose, he helps guide Jack through the fog to live his dreams. Zero is a man's best friend who takes his role seriously even in a supernatural setting, which earns him quite a few points. Now let's move on to the bigger and better heroes. Those previous guys were great, don't get me wrong, but the superior sidekicks are where it's at when it comes to heroics. Kicking off this category is Abby Mallard, Chicken Little's best friend and main support system. Out of all of his friends, she's the one who tries hardest to sincerely listen to his problems and give him advice, but most importantly, she'll stand by him even in the toughest of times. She helps Chicken Little and the gang return Kirby to his alien parents, and even helps him get closure with Buck, which led the latter to finally apologizing, realizing how crummy of a dad he'd been throughout the movie. Without Abby, Chicken Little would have been even more miserable, so we have to give her some credit for being one of the best friends on our list. Next up, we have the legendary Carl from Meet the Robinsons. This robot is more than just a hired hand. He's a true friend, trustworthy enough for Wilbur to confide in him about losing the time machine. Carl will try his darndest to keep his buddy on the right path, and when push comes to shove, he's loyal enough to stand by him no matter what path he chooses. In the end, he was one of the biggest helping hands to Lewis in defeating Doris and returning to his own time, only requesting a cooler redesign in the new future. Rhino is another one of the many ironically named Disney sidekicks. I'll let you figure out why. But despite a misleading moniker and a delusional outlook on life, Rhino is more than worthy of a decent spot on our list. He's the type of guy who will help his friends whether they want his help or not, wise enough to know that when a guy like Balt denies needing help, that's probably when they need it the most. From one animal pal to the next, let's go on down to the bayou to talk about Louie, the jazz-lovin' gator from The Princess and the Frog. Like Mushu and a lot of other sidekicks really, Louie initially helps the heroes for his own gain, wanting to be transformed into a human to play jazz with a big band. Now, well, he does achieve half of that goal, and it's the important half, but on top of being the pioneer for jazz-playing reptiles everywhere, he's also a pretty good friend. Despite his fear, he's always willing to fight for his friends at the end of the day, and he's also quite sensitive, offering Raymond comfort and a chance to see his friends one last time in his final moments. This big guy has a big heart to match. He may not be as big, but Hercules' mentor, Philoctetes, deserves a pretty respectable spot. He had his dreams shattered when even his finest trainees failed to live up to the hype. It wasn't until Hercules sought him out that he had another chance at greatness. Now, we have to mention that Phil's primary motivation is being admired for his work as a teacher, which is a motive that earns him the Pride Center Medal, but that doesn't mean he's a bad guy. Quite the opposite, because his training of Hercules results in him saving the world from Hades' evil plan.
That's Phil's boy!
Over time, he becomes a sort of uncle figure to Herc, comforting him when he's scorned for his excessive strength and doing his best to encourage him even when times are tough. Phil is a great guy and is absolutely worthy of having the Honorable Danny DeVito as his voice actor, but as great as he is, the remaining heroes go even further. Next is Roquefort from the Aristocats. Sure, he may not have been an official sidekick, but he was loyal to Duchess and her kittens. After finding out they were missing, he immediately went out to go looking for them, and when he found out the butler wanted them dead, he tried warning them to stay away.
Look out for them!
When they were trapped again, Roquefort didn't hesitate to run for help. Man, Disney really likes making its mice truly upstanding citizens, don't they? I'm starting to wonder if they're biased or something. Oh, no, but I just remembered Ratigan. Oh, well, let's move on to Zazu, the bird who just can't wait for Simba to grow up so he can become a proper king. As the king's royal advisor, Zazu was dealing with a lot of stress, 24/7, from a traitorous brother to an irresponsible son. Mufasa's family wasn't easy to manage, but Zazu did his best, enduring a lot of hardships to keep Simba safe and Mufasa informed about the goings-on of his kingdom. He was also the first to accept Simba back into the kingdom with open wings, showing him the respect he deserved and knowing that Simba wouldn't have killed Mufasa. You could argue that Zazu could have done more, being the only one who really knew about Scar's evil before he became king, but I say he couldn't have done much else that wouldn't have resulted in him being eaten.
Impeccable timing, Your Majesty.
Up next, we've got Turk and Tantor from Tarzan. These two are Tarzan's best animal buddies, wanting nothing more than for him to stay away from humans and keep living his best life with the animals. Despite their hesitance, though, they do actually support him when they realize that becoming close to humans is what he really wants, and when he's in trouble, they don't hesitate to help him out. Having Stitch so high up on our list is sure to be controversial. Actually, it might not be. Come on, everyone loves Stitch. But he was literally created to cause chaos throughout the galaxy, and when he lands on Earth, you can tell pretty quickly. But Stitch is beloved by fans everywhere for a reason, and that's all thanks to his friendship with Lilo, who taught him how to love and care about others. This little alien literally overcame his own biology to become a better pet and friend, and when he starts glitching out in the sequel, he resorts to flying away in a spaceship to keep himself from hurting anyone, temporarily dying in the process. The dude would rather die than hurt anyone, and that's worth a pretty high spot in our book. From outer space to under the sea. Next, we have Sebastian and Flounder from The Little Mermaid. We're placing them together because they're very much connected with Ariel, although in very different ways. Flounder is her closest friend, tagging along on her adventures despite his reservations, and when push comes to shove, he's more than willing to throw hands, fins, to protect her from threats. Then there's Sebastian, the king's royal advisor. This crab may seem like a claw in the mud, but he's far more defined by his compassion than anything else. Despite knowing how much he'd get chewed out for it, he ultimately relents in letting Ariel pursue her dream of marrying Prince Eric instead of telling the king.
The Sea King will never know.
As strict as he is, Sebastian is the definition of tough love, and true to his species, that hard shell hides a total softy of a man. Tell everybody we're on our way to talk about Coda next. We first meet this bold little bear cub when Kenai gets caught in one of his traps, letting him go on the condition that he'd help him get back home. Coda's a sweet kid, even if he's a bit mischievous. He's beloved by his fellow bears and gets along easily with others, as shown by how quickly his brotherly bond with Kenai is forged. Even after being told that Kenai was the one who accidentally killed his own mother, Coda ultimately forgives him, and the two are brothers for life, which shows a surprising amount of emotional maturity for a kid who's probably like 8, maybe? Following Coda, we have Trusty and Jock from Lady and the Tramp. As Lady's dear neighbors, they were a steadfast support throughout the movie. Not only did they teach Lady about the world, but they were always there to support her when she was having trouble. They offered her to live with them, thinking she was being neglected, and they stepped in to save Tramp when they heard he kept the rat from reaching the baby. These two are some truly upstanding canines. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a hand for the great Timothy Mouse. Dumbo was one of those films that was darker than we remembered, and no, it's not just the blackface crows. Poor Dumbo went through it as a kid, so thank goodness for this little mouse. It was Timothy that helped Dumbo get food and stay clean, his thinking that got him to land a key role in a performance, and his compassion that helped boost Dumbo's confidence, calling his ears cute and eventually encouraging the elephant to fly.
Dumbo, you're a climax!
He even made sure Dumbo could visit his mother even if she couldn't hold her son the way she wanted. This guy is a truly great character that deserves more praise. Now it's time to kick off our top 20. First up we have Nick Wilde. Nick was introduced as a con artist, and he's pretty darn good at what he does. He cheats people out of money on a regular basis with schemes that range from simple to downright convoluted.
It's called a hustle, sweetheart.
In his defense though, poor Nick is just acting in the way he thinks he has to. When he was just a kid, he was assaulted and bullied for being a predator, like the animal kind. Something that he literally didn't have control over. As a result, he does whatever he can to get by, regardless of morality. It isn't until his friendship with Judy begins to blossom that he steadily becomes a better person. He uses his sharp skills to help save Zootopia from the night howler drug epidemic, helping save potentially countless predators from brainwashing and prey from straight up death. In the end, Nick becomes a police officer alongside Judy, showing that he does genuinely want to be a good person and help others, but only time will tell how he delivers on that, so we'll keep him here for now. Mrs. Potts, Lumiere, and Cogsworth are up next. Aside from having some incredible hospitality, these three are ride or die companions to the Beast. They act as wingmen and one wing woman to the Beast, helping Belle feel welcome and helping her hook up with the main monster himself. That's already pretty good, but they earn even more brownie points for the fact that they fight off Gaston's mob in the final act of the movie. A clock, a teapot, and a candelabra aren't exactly the most powerful combatants you could ask for, so we have to give them some serious credit for stepping up to the task anyway. From a trio to a duo, next we have Timon and Pumbaa from The Lion King. These two saved Simba from some presumptuous vultures, and despite the clear danger of befriending a mighty lion, they managed to take him under their wing and show him that life doesn't have to be full of worries. I mean, granted, Simba just witnessed his father dying in front of him, so don't worry about it isn't exactly the most sensitive kind of advice, but it did keep him from eating these two, and the pair lived happily together for years with Simba.
Repeat after me. Hakuna Matata.
Eventually, Timon and Pumbaa helped Simba return to and reclaim his kingdom, taking some serious risks in the process. They might have mainly been doing it to keep from being eaten at first, but they still proved themselves to be good friends slash adoptive parents at the end of the day, so we're gonna give them a good spot regardless. He may be one of the less verbal sidekicks, but the magic carpet's actions speak to his character more than words ever could. Even Aladdin himself acknowledged you can trust this little fabric-y friend with your life. As shy as it might be at times, the magic carpet is a loyal steed who's more than willing to put itself in harm's way to get Aladdin and company wherever they need to go. There's not much more to say about this guy, it's just one of the purest steeds in Disney's repertoire. Now let's talk about the first Disney sidekicks, the 7 dwarves who took Snow White into their home. Sure, they initially saw Snow White as more of a maid than anything else, but they steadily came to see her as part of their family, becoming protective of her almost as if she were an adoptive daughter of sorts. They're generous and caring, hesitant to leave her by herself in their home, and constantly warning her of the imminent danger she'd be in if the evil queen were to find her. When they mistakenly thought she was dead, their immediate reaction was to hunt the queen down and kill her. Sure, revenge is bad and all that, whatever, but dude, she's literally called the evil queen. I'm not gonna take points off for trying to take her out. Alright, I promise this is the last Umbrella entry. Victor, Hugo, and Laverne were the closest thing Quasi had to friends before he met Esmeralda, and even then it's up for debate whether they were actually sentient or not, but whether they're real or figments of Quasimodo's imagination, they're always supportive of him, encouraging him to get out there and show the world how great he is on the inside. And when things don't work out, they're always there to comfort comfort him through it. Up next, we have perhaps the most weirdly cast sidekick in Disney history, Valentino from Wish. Initially a regular baby goat who acted as Asha's beloved pet, Valentino was given a voice and a total comprehension of English language when the pair met Star, giving even more personality to a goat who was already pretty willing to help out.
Careful, my mother was shaved for that yacht.
Valentino is standard fare for Disney sidekicks, so we don't have too much to say about the little guy. Just know that he's always ready to help in whatever capacity he's needed, and that there are a few more remarkable sidekicks who've earned higher spots. We won't talk about Bruno, no, today, but we will talk about Antonio Madrigal. Out of all of Mirabel's family, this animal lover offers her the most help in her quest to save the family's magic. He's an introvert with a heart of gold. While he doesn't go out of his way to interact with others much, he's always happy to support his family, like when he offered Bruno a place to stay in his own room. Most importantly, he has a capybara friend, which makes him canonically the most powerful Disney sidekick in the studio's history, if you ask me. Next up, we have a real star, Raymond from The Princess and the Frog. A hopeful romantic, he was quick to step in to aid Tiana and Naveen without anything promised to him. He stayed to help Tiana despite her lashing out at him, and he even took on the shadows with only the small amount of light he could produce. Even while he was dying, he expressed concern for Tiana and Naveen, noting they were still frogs. When he learned of their love, he gave his blessing before passing on and reuniting with Evangeline in the sky. He had a bright light, but the one in his heart shines even brighter. Just don't go making goo-goo eyes at his woman. And landing just outside of the top 10, Baloo from the Jungle Book makes his grand debut. You might remember him as the absolute legend who taught Mowgli about the bare necessities of life, but this sloth bear has more to him than just his great singing voice and a love for relaxation. Even if we have to give him the sloth Sinner medal out of sheer respect, he doesn't hesitate to join Bagheera in escorting Mowgli, showing a willingness to risk his safety and his relaxation time for the sake of others who might need him. It honestly feels wrong to not place him any higher, but believe me, these final 10 have more than earned their positions. They are the top tier sidekicks. At number 10, we have Sisu, the titular last dragon from Raya and the Last Dragon. After her family lost their lives protecting the world from the Drun, Sisu was left dormant for 500 years, only revived when Raya summoned her to help break the curse and save her father. Sisu believes in the good of all creatures to the point where she can even be naive and get herself and others in trouble. But while that doesn't make her the most effective, it certainly makes her stand out as one of the most merciful characters on our list, especially considering how even Namari holding her at proverbial gunpoint wasn't enough for Sisu to stop believing in her, earning himself a much higher spot than he did last time. Next up is Dr. Dawson from The Great Mouse Detective. He may be less intelligent and daring than his eventual partner Basil, but that doesn't take away from how much of a stand-up guy Dawson is. When he notices a little girl crying, he doesn't hesitate for a moment to help her find her lost father, immediately accompanying her to Basil's home to get him on the case. He really goes hard for her, especially considering he doesn't even know this kid, and he constantly puts himself in harm's way for the sake of the case and saving her father's life. This guy's got a good head on his shoulders and a great conscience as well. Speaking of which, next up we have Jiminy Cricket from Pinocchio. If we had some kind of loyalty virtue medal or anything, Jiminy would be getting it without a doubt. He stuck by Pinocchio through being devoured by a whale, through being stolen by a puppeteer, through almost dying to save Geppetto. He did everything he could to get Pinocchio on the right path. Despite hardly ever being thanked for his efforts, Jiminy constantly put himself in harm's way and stayed by his boy's side. The relationship between cats and dogs in cartoons is a rocky one, but if Tibbs has anything to say about it, the dynamic definitely has its high points. This cat was easily the MVP of 101 Dalmatians. He risked his life saving the puppies, not just the ones being sought out by their folks either. This cat was willing to get in between the puppies and a grown man with a crowbar, willing to create a distraction so they could run, and willing to do all this and more to save innocent puppies from being harmed, which is pretty much the definition of pure good if you ask me. Landing just outside of our top 5 is Baymax. While he was literally built to do good, we aren't going to take much credit away from him for that. Baymax is devoted entirely to his protocol, whether it's caring for parents until they're fully satisfied or fending off attackers in battle mode. Baymax is a protector through and through, and he was willing to sacrifice his robotic life if that's what it took to save Hiro.
Are you satisfied with your care?
He's only kept from a higher spot by the fact that his good deeds are technically the work of Tadashi, his creator, when you really think about it. On the other hand, the top 5 are pure bona fide heroes, even bigger than Baymax, if you ask us. But your wish is our command, so let's kick off the top 5 with the legendary Genie from Aladdin. He's honestly above the title of sidekick, but we have to include him. There's nothing this larger-than-life spirit can't do. For starters, he's an incredible entertainer, always goofing around, cracking jokes or impersonating, and spreading joy everywhere he goes. He's also the most optimistic character ever, even knowing that he'll likely be doomed to be imprisoned in the lamp for all of eternity. The guy never stops trying to keep morale up around him. Genie is also one of Aladdin's most loyal friends. Besides his constant practical jokes, he's always helpful, caring, and wise.
All joking aside, you really ought to be yourself.
Not to mention generous, which seems to be his middle name. Remember when he was willing to give up his freedom for Aladdin and Jasmine? That's because, to him, the most valuable thing in the world is a friend. Heck, he even had a whole song about it in the sequel. At number 4, we have Pacha from The Emperor's New Groove. This guy, man, this guy is nice. For starters, he has the patience of an absolute saint. Despite being told point blank that Kuzco plans to run his whole village out of town so he can build a water park, Pacha is ultimately willing to help him get turned back into a human. Of course, not without blackmailing him into backing out of his plans.
Build your summer house somewhere else.
But we can hardly blame him for that, honestly. Pacha's doing the right thing by his family and his whole community, and all the while he's believing that even the biggest, most irredeemable jerk he's ever met has some good deep down. It's ironically this very faith in Kuzco that leads him to becoming a better person, and his generosity doesn't stop there. In the sequel, Kronk's New Groove, Pacha and his family pose as Kronk's family to impress his old man, asking for basically nothing in return. Pacha is as good of a man to any given person in his community as he is to his own family, and that's the sign of a truly kind man in our book. Our former gold medalist of good is now taking home the bronze, but don't let that fool you. Olaf is still a gem who's earned all the warm hugs he can get. But first, this video is brought to you by WickedBinge channel memberships. You can gain access to our videos early before anyone else, plus gain access to members-only emojis and loyalty badges by supporting the channel through a membership. We all know that line he gave Anna when pulling her towards the fire. Some people are worth melting for. He risked his existence to try and help this girl any way he could.
You're melting.
Some people are worth melting for.
In the original movie, when Anna's dying from the ice blast she got to the heart, he sets her up by the fire to keep her warm, even when it causes him to melt. The fact that the movie doesn't acknowledge this as the act of true love that Anna needs to be saved is probably the biggest plot hole that Frozen has. Like, the man was literally melting alive for his friend's sake. If that doesn't count as love, then I genuinely don't know what does.
Wow, you really don't know anything about love, do you?
What is love? He may be small, downright tiny even, but he's small in the biggest, helpful, best way. Piglet is Winnie the Pooh's best friend and a contender for the cutest sidekick in Disney history. No matter which of Pooh's adventures you're looking at, you can expect Piglet to be by his side through thick and thin. He built Eeyore's house and didn't even insist on taking credit. Saved Pooh's life when he was stuck in a log, and those are just a couple of random examples from Piglet's big movie, mind you. All of this is done despite him being underappreciated by his friends. Piglet never complains nor backs down from helping out, even though he's often downright terrified. He's a guy who genuinely loves his friends and delights in making people happy, making him one of the most pure and sweet characters in Disney history. He'd be a surefire choice for gold, but love it or hate it, there's no denying that Wish introduced a character who's basically the objective winner of this discussion. Star is a lot like Piglet, really. He's childlike, innocent, and adorable. He takes genuine pleasure in helping others more than anything else, and he has magical powers on top of that. It's Star's power that grants the wishes of the people, with Asha's wish being as pure and powerful as it was. Star straight up materialized in front of her. So we have a little ball of Kirby-shaped magic who chooses to grant wishes on the condition that they're made with good intentions and strong faith. Man, how do you even get more good than that? Star is implied to be responsible for all the positive magic in Disney history, from making Asha into a fairy godmother, and I mean a Cinderella one, not a Shrek 2 one, to granting countless other wishes throughout the Disney multiverse. He's basically a benevolent, pure-hearted deity, and that's on top of having the personality of a happy little baby. There's no way we couldn't give the gold medal of good to this little guy, and okay, if you disagree, fine. You say no to that precious little face. Yeah, okay, that's what I thought.